Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'll be covering some of my best tips for crewing a main battle tank in squad. Whether you're a driver, commander, or gunner, you should find this video of use to you. I've aimed this at beginner and intermediate players, so even if you've played the game for a while, you can still pick up some snippets of useful information here. Just before we jump in, I do stream squad on Twitch pretty much every day at the moment, so if you want to ask me any questions or join us for some games, you can head over to my Twitch at twitch.tv/MrAtomicDuck. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the video. So, I'm just going to start throwing these tips at you in no particular order, mainly because I don't think there's as many for me to give to the driver and commander roles as there is for the gunner. So let's get started with the basics. First and foremost, I'd always recommend having a commander in your MBT if you're running one. They're an incredibly underrated tool and can give you another set of eyes, which can be the key between winning or losing a tank duel. The first shot is often the deciding factor, so having another set of eyes there to spot the tank is always recommended. On top of this, many MBTs have a closed-top gunner seat, so your commander can engage infantry for you, or even light vehicles, from the safety of the tank. If you're leading the tank squad, make sure you give your commander a fire team so that he can mark targets for you. And whilst I'm at it, it's worth noting that some tanks also have a fourth seat meant for a loader. This doesn't actually affect the speed of loading rounds in any way, but often gives you an extra seat with an open top gunner for suppressing infantry in a pinch. One of the biggest tips I can give to any tank player is to focus on enemy armor. You are there first and foremost to deal with enemy vehicles. You can support an infantry push by all means, but try to stay behind your friendly infantry at all times. It's surprisingly easy to take out an MBT as infantry once they're tracked, and it isn't hard to track a tank, with it being quite a large target. Supporting an infantry push before you deal with the enemy armor is risky, because the infantry are going to report your position, and from there, the enemy armor will most likely get the first hit on you. Try your best to find their armor before it finds you. This brings me nicely onto my next tip. And my next tip is to know your enemy. Each tank has its own weak spots, which I won't go over in detail now, but the long and short of it is that most tanks have strong armor at the front that can often ricochet rounds, and all tanks hold their engine in the back of the vehicle. And hitting the rear armor will not only engine them, but will do the most damage. Try to disable the vehicle you're fighting first, either by hitting the tracks or engine, and from there you can go for any spot you can get your eyes on. If you're driving the tank, keep your front armor pointed at the enemy for as long as possible. Just as an example for this rule, the Canadian Leopard is one of the hardest tanks to kill in squad, as its front armor is perfectly slanted for ricochets. Try to get information as to its whereabouts, then strike from a flank and aim for its engine. Rear and side armor shots will always be more successful. Better yet, strike when it's already engaged in combat. Timing is everything when it comes to engaging better equipped tanks in squad especially. My next tip is one that is involved in almost every aspect of squad that you decide to play, which is to communicate, not just with your crew, but with other squads. If you're the driver of a tank especially, be sure to communicate to your gunner when you're turning the vehicle during an engagement, so that they can prepare to adjust, especially if the gunner has no stabilization in the tank that you're driving. If you're a commander, be sure to communicate the position of enemy targets using both bearings and landmarks. For example, saying he's right there by the tree is a bad call out for your gunner, but instead saying he's bearing 145 on the right hand side of the tree halfway up the hill is a much better call out and is going to give your gunner much quicker reaction times. Lastly, if you're leading your tank squad, be sure to communicate to other squads when you're engaging the enemy tank as soon as possible. The more time you give them, the better. They may be able to give you a hand, and most importantly, be sure to call out the status of the enemy tank if you die in a fight. Is it tracked? Did you do significant damage? Make sure you're also marking them on the map. And even if you lose the fight, a wounded tank is a chance for your infantry to pounce and secure the kill for your team. The next tip I've got for you is one that I feel often gets forgotten or neglected and can make your game more active and also benefit your team. Repair stations. Either build them yourself or request them from other squads. On some maps, this isn't super important, mainly ones where your main base isn't going to be far away, but on others, it's absolutely key. If you're rolling back to main base and repairing for 10 minutes, that's 10 minutes where you're not in the fight. Having a repair station on or nearby to your first or second capture point can cut that time down immensely and keep you in the fight for longer. Range markers are an important part of squad, which is generally why I'll say that the gunner of a tank is always best utilized as a squad leader. They can use their marks to quickly range targets and fire without waiting for input from another member of the squad to range a target for them. Some tanks don't come equipped with a rangefinder, so this can help level the playing field with you and your opponent. I feel it's worth mentioning the Canadian Leopard here, which I know confuses a lot of people the first time they use it. The Leopard has a rangefinder, but unlike other tanks, you can range up by holding X and using your scroll wheel. Once you get the hang of this, it quickly becomes one of the best tanks in the game, and will allow you to land your first shots reliably with ease, where other tanks may need to take one shot to range their target properly. I'd strongly suggest taking a look at this on the firing range and getting the hang of it before use. Lastly, when it comes to ranging AP Sabo, HE round and your Coax MG, they will all have different ranging markers, so be sure to adjust when changing ammo types. Okay, so my next tip is a pretty general one for the gunner seat, and when you're not engaging anything at all and there's nothing in your sights or you're moving to a new position, keep AP Sabo rounds loaded at all times. If an enemy vehicle shows up, you're gonna want to be able to fire as quickly as possible. You don't want to have to load a new round if an enemy tank catches you off guard. If infantry presents itself, you can quickly switch to the Coax, which requires 0 transition time. There's one last tip that I'd like to end this video with, and whilst I say this is a beginner targeted tip, I see way too many experienced players doing this as well in their tanks. Where possible, stay out of built-up areas. I think the biggest exception to this rule is Fallujah, since most of that map is a city, but putting yourself in areas with lots of places for infantry to hide and get the drop on you is just straight up a bad idea. Try to play the flanks and find long-range firing positions rather than getting into the thick of it. It's easy for new players to think they're unstoppable in a tank, but don't get lured into that trap. Like I said earlier in this video, infantry can very easily track you, and that's when the enemy armor and heavy AT is going to pounce on you and finish you off. That's it for me in this one, folks, but I hope you found this video useful. If there's anything you feel I've missed here, be sure to drop it in the comments. One of the most helpful things for new players are the teachings of more experienced players, so please feel free. Lastly, dropping a like and subscribing to the channel hugely helps me, and if you'd like more squad content, there's plenty of it right here, so do consider it. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.